As far as I'm concerned, I prefer silent vice to ostentatious virtue. Albert Einstein. Well, hey there. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. Now, this is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but actually have the confidence to rock retirement. I think that's the key, right? I like this quote by Albert Einstein. Ostentatious anything is just not really that attractive, not something that we want to follow. I don't know about silent vice, but I do like the concept of, rather than preaching, simply trying to live as an exemplar. Now, an exemplar, what is that? That is one that is worthy of imitation. Could be in one area of life or another. An exemplar, just being someone that others want to try to imitate in some way. I like that much more than ostentatious anything. Better than silent vice for sure. So this is segment 2 of how to live a heroic retirement. And Michael Balchan and I are going to talk about virtue. What are some core virtues that are universal, and what are some that are specific to you? And why do we care about them in building a framework to live a heroic retirement? So we're going to get into that. We're also going to answer some of your questions. Now, if you're not, I would suggest, hey, why don't you sign up for 6 Shot Saturday, which is our weekly summary email of the show, where we share links to resources that we mention or use, whether it's in an answer or the Heroic app as an example, and where I share some tidbits on things I think you might find interesting. You can sign up for this at 6shotsaturday.com or rogerwhitney.com, our home on the interweb. With that, let's get on with the show. Well, today's show isn't necessarily sponsored by, it's actually not sponsored by, but I want to give a shout out to New Retirement, newretirement.com, which is one of the best, if not the best, online retirement calculators that is available to you as a consumer. So you can go check them out at newretirement.com. All right, it's week 2 of living a heroic retirement with Michael. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic.
Did you feel good?
To be back. Yeah, I feel great.
All right, good. All right, so we have this theoretical structure of what a hero is, and it's not Hercules. It's someone doing something important in the world, and it can be micro. Today, I thought we could go down a little bit deeper, a layer deeper, peel the onion, and talk about the core virtues that you and I should focus on every day to walk this journey. But I was just thinking of this, Michael. Before we do that, I want to bring out a framework because I think it's important for people. And that is that you can complete this. You can actually do this in completion. And it makes me think of a framework that you and Brian have taught me, which is a guiding light versus a distant shore. So can we frame this first before we get into the virtues so we don't stress people out too much?
Absolutely. We'll frame it up and I'll speak to guiding stars and distant shores and a couple other frames that are that same kind of thing. But I want to ask this, Hercules is a hero, although potentially not for the reason that most people might assume so. And I'll come back to that in the choice of Hercules. That is a famous story. And also challenges, which I know we're going to talk about. How do you approach life given that it has challenges? And the famous line of something like, who would Hercules have been if he had stayed in bed and not feeling willing to get out and go face the Hydra and go face all the different huge mythical beasts that were attacking everybody else? So he was willing to put himself on the line and put himself in danger. Of course, he also had the strength and all the other things. But this idea of guiding star, not a distant shore. So that particular line comes from Tal Ben-Shahar. Tal Ben-Shahar is another positive psychologist, wrote Happier, Pursuit of Perfect. I took his class, so he taught the largest class in Harvard's history. I was an undergrad at that time and was part of that largest class in Harvard's history. At the time, this is like the science of happiness, really? Like, this is a class I get to take? Yes, and it was amazing. But he says, our ideals are like guiding stars and not distant shores. It is something that we want to move towards. We've got to recognize that we are never, ever actually going to get there. When we think about expressing the best version of ourselves, that self-actualization, eudaimonia, flourishing in its highest form, it's asymptotic. So asymptotic is the principle from math. And it basically means like a function that approaches it, but never actually touches it. So never, ever, ever actually gets there, even if it gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. The best version of yourself is not something that you will ever actually be, because the moment you are better, there is another better available to you. So we have a tendency to think at some point when I have gotten it all figured out, like I'll be good. When I've won all the games, those extrinsic games, I'm going to be happy. And then maybe it's like, oh, well, once I've won this internal game too, then I will be happy. And let me just get into the personal development side of things and do a lot of internal work and look at my past and look at my future and figure out how I can do this. And we think I still constantly fall into this trap of when I fall short, it's a sign that I'm not there yet. Instead of when I fall short, it's a sign that I'm never, ever, ever, ever actually going to be there, because there is no there anyway. My coach, Phil Stutt, says we will never be exonerated. We will never have to stop putting in hard work, have to stop facing challenges until ultimately we are gone from this current physical manifestation of life, right? Until you've hit that end point, you will always have additional opportunities available to you. So no matter how much success you have achieved in any given area, you can use that in service of that next success, that next success, that next success. That having been said, if we think that there's a finish line that we've got to get to, and if we're judging ourselves based on our ability to cross that finish line, that that shore, that somewhere out there that I just need to get to, we can never, ever, ever, ever win that game. If instead we bring it back and say, okay, it's not about getting somewhere, but it's about right here where I am and how can I show up with the best effort in this moment, striving to live by these virtues that we'll get into. And rather than judging ourselves based on outcome or some future outcome we think might be there, and we start to judge ourselves based on process and how am I showing up in this moment? Am I striving to do my best in this moment? That is a game that we can win. Never like check the box, I've won it good and for all, but each single moment we have a new opportunity. Can I do that? Can I strive to live that way? These moments, yes, doing great. These moments, oh no, eek, fell on my face, fell short, said that thing that made this person mad or was rude here or chose not to do the thing that I know was best for me. But rather than seeing that as I'm failing, we see, oh, perfect. I have now a new opportunity to learn from that. Okay, I didn't make the right decision. How can I make the right decision next time? I said something that made somebody upset, made somebody angry, caused pain, hurt, rather than say, oh, I've got to prove myself right. And like my ego is important here and I'm going to be right. How can I just apologize? Hey, that didn't come out right. Hey, I noticed like there's a little bit of tension here. I feel like I may have hurt your feelings or whatever it is. Be willing to swallow our pride, sacrifice being right in this moment in service of striving to be the best version of ourselves in the next moment.
Even with ourselves, and that, even if it's just with ourselves. And this is one reason why I've resonated with this and have gone down the rabbit hole from the coaching program and with the app and licensed it for the club. I think, Michael, is on the show, we teach an agile approach to managing the money side of things in retirement. We use agile project management methodology mainly because you're always going to have to iterate. You cannot eliminate the uncertainty. It's all about process and making lots of little decisions consistently a little bit better over time, even if it's on the money side. So I think this resonates really well, and I think people get it. And so that should take a lot of pressure off if you can actually get there, right? You don't have to have certainty if you're never actually going to get there. So don't put so much stress on yourself.
We like to teach true confidence. So confidence comes from Latin words confidere. Con means with, fidere means intense trust. So confidence is with intense trust, to have intense trust. And some people might say, well, intense trust in what? Intense trust that I'm going to win, intense trust that I'm going to be successful, intense trust in the outcome. No, intense trust in yourself and in your ability to show up regardless of what's happening, regardless of the circumstance, and take that next step to the best of your ability. So if we have true confidence in ourselves, it's that no matter what has happened, I'm still going to get back up to stay in the game. If I made a financial move, made an investment that didn't go as well as I hoped, Hopefully I've got a balanced portfolio, whatever it is. And even if it truly like, things aren't looking great, perfect, I'm still going to get up and do what needs done in this next moment in order to create that outcome that I want going forward. And it's one thing to like say that, it's another thing to actually get that. And it's another thing to actually feel that in a lived experience. For me, relationships is the place where this shows up most consistently, where it's like, oh, if I'm having an argument, then it means there's something wrong with the relationship, versus like the argument is actually an opportunity for us to grow closer in connection. And on a personal level, like an individual level, if I'm mad about something that I did, or I'm angry with myself, upset with myself, or have any sort of negative self-talk, it could be something like, oh, I'm not actualized, right? Or that's an opportunity for me to develop a deeper relationship with myself, develop a deeper level of confidence in my ability to show up for life. So not just will we never get there, not just is this incremental agile approach important, but that recognition that it's our ability to take that next rep to embrace whatever happens and still show up and strive to do our best and not check the box on, oh my gosh, I have failed. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset style, Carol Dweck. And this is a huge, huge, huge shift, right? Fixed mindset is the things that I do are a reflection of who I am, some innate set of values. Growth mindset are the things that I do are just where I am in this current moment. And I have the opportunity to improve, to grow in the next moment.
And that's the key, I think. Just what you just said there at the last is the key, that this is just where I'm at in the moment. I can choose differently next. Go ahead. Yeah.
And that's a perfect segue into the virtue. So you've seen I know that there's audio and there's video. I've got the virtues up here on the wall behind me, which we sort of use as a prop. We've got the virtues in the app. One of the virtues most highly correlated with well-being, according to modern science, is curiosity. So curiosity, we define it as an openness to seeing what's working, seeing what needs work, and an openness to life and new perspective. It's almost like the growth mindset in a virtue, right? You're not looking at your life and saying, this is just fixed and I'm a failure because whatever it is, but let me be open to new perspectives. Let me have that experimenter's mindset. Look at the data that's come in and just be curious. What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? One of the top 5 virtues most highly correlated with well-being is that curiosity. And I can go deeper into the virtues now, but it felt like a good thing to pull on. Did we hit everything you wanted in terms of exonerated and
I think it's that growth mindset is what it comes down to, and not beating yourself up, but being curious about, well, why did I do that? So you're 36 years old, Michael. I'm going to give you my tip for a great marriage. I've been married 32 years this year. My secret to a good marriage, and I've shared it on the show before, is I never want to have a big conversation with my wife. I don't want a big conversation. And the way you don't have a big conversation is you have a lot of little small ones where they can maybe be a little uncomfortable ones where you can correct things early on, right? Where you can stay walking hand in hand together. And it made me think of that when you were talking, because I've messed up a little once or twice in my marriage. And when I do, I try to own it and examine, why did I do that? And apologize and say, well, this is why I did that. I'm sorry. And then how do I do this better so we're walking hand in hand, which fits well with what you're talking about. So don't have big conversations, have little hard ones.
I love that. We celebrated 10 years last year. So we've got a long way to go still, but none that advice will come in very handy. So
I think you got that down. All right. So these, go ahead.
Yeah. So the virtues, I'll walk through 2 sets of virtues, and to bring it back to the context around moment to moment to moment to moment. It's there. It's not about this long game and achieving success, but it's about, can I show up as best I possibly can in this moment?
Define the purpose of these virtues within the structure we're going to be building.
Yep. So in the last episode, we talked about kind of point of life, according to ancient Greeks, eudaimonia. This literally translates as good soul, to express the best version of yourself. Positive psychology said the same thing, to flourish. They also give us the exact same answer in terms of how do we actually do that. In ancient Greek, the word that they would use is arete. I've got it tattooed here on my forearm for the people that can see the video. Arete, it's a Greek word. It means expressing the best version of yourself, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. So it's not just I am a eudaimon, but as I'm able to live as that more and more consistently each and every single moment. It often gets translated into virtue or excellence, but it has that deeper meaning. Positive psychology says the exact same thing. If you want to flourish, the key is to put your virtues into action. So a virtue is kind of like a quality or a high level ideal. And there are 4 virtues that ancient wisdom kind of all coheres around. There's a lot of things that are different in a lot of wisdom traditions. And there's also a lot of things that are the same. These virtues, these qualities that they tell us will help us live a fulfilling life have astonishing coherence in the overlap. We have labeled them wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love. And we kind of orient these virtues like on a compass. So that distant shore versus guiding star metaphor, it's almost like this is a compass that you can use for how to orient yourself in life and navigate life in a way that will help you feel this deep sense of innate flourishing, of expressing your best. It's got to start with wisdom. I know the game that I'm playing and how to play it well, right? I'm living with wisdom. Aristotle, I think, said this was like the mother or the father of all virtues. Wisdom, everything else is just an expression of wisdom that's showing up in different ways. But wisdom is knowing the game that you're playing and how to play it well. And that both refers to this intrinsic, extrinsic kind of map of like the extrinsic gains versus the intrinsic gains, as well as this sense of what's in my control and what's not in my control. So it is unwise to spend all of your energy and time and attention on things that are completely outside of your control. Byron Katie has a great line: when I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time. Can't teach a dog to meow. You can't teach a cat to bark. If I'm arguing about the weather, that's a waste of energy. That is outside of my control. Wisdom is knowing what's in your control, knowing what's not in your control. What's this? Serenity prayer?
Yeah, serenity prayer.
Is a manifestation of that same kind of principle. So wisdom, I know the game I'm playing and how to play it well. You got to take that game, you got to ground it in discipline. You got to ground it in self-mastery. Ancient wisdom, they might refer to this as temperance, but really it's like self-mastery. And we say, I have structural, reactive, and expansive discipline. So structural discipline are going to be the habits that are in your life. What are the structures that you have? I go to bed at this time. I meditate, I work out, I say these things, I do the journaling practice, whatever it is. Reactive discipline is you say something to me, I'm able to not just respond like, but I'm able to pause. I'm able to, and it could be reactive discipline in my own self of, I want to do this. No, I'm going to pause and go a different direction. Viktor Frankl's in between stimulus and response, there is a gap. In that gap exists our ability to choose, exists our freedom. So can we step into that gap between stimulus and response? That's reactive discipline, and it's another form of self-mastery. And then we've got expansive discipline. When you are facing a challenge, can you step up to the plate and say, bring it on? Can you embrace growth in all opportunities? Abraham Maslow has some lines that we've played on with this, stepping forward into growth or backward into safety. Every moment in life affords us a choice. We can step forward into growth, back into safety, forward into growth, back into safety. +1, -1. You have a big conversation with your wife. Oops, had that. I didn't follow my own advice. Perfect. Now, how do I want to course correct? Let me step forward into growth, forward into the discomfort of acknowledging that, into that chaos of the conversation, knowing I'm going to emerge on the other side, hopefully stronger as an individual and stronger as a unit.
And those are multipliers, right? Because if I step forward into growth, there are ripples from my doing that. I'm sorry, I was wrong. There are ripples that impact the relationship in this example. If I step backwards, oh yeah? Well, there are ripples to that as well. So there's some compounding that happens with these pluses or negatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got wisdom. I know the game I'm playing and how to play it well. We've got self-mastery. I've got that structural, reactive, and expansive discipline. I've learned how to master myself. Then we've got courage. Courage, Robert Beeswell Steiner has a definition for this. Courage is the virtue that vitalizes all the other virtues. It comes from the Latin word, the root for heart. So courage comes from the heart. And just like the heart is the organ that vitalizes all the organs in our body, that pumps blood to the other organs of our body, courage is the virtue that vitalizes all the other virtues. We have to have the courage to, definition, take action in the presence of fear. So that could be part of that, again, wisdom and self-mastery. I know I should do this thing. Can I actually do this thing? I know it might be uncomfortable to apologize or to do whatever it is. Do I have the courage to actually do that? Do I have the courage to take action in the presence of fear, to do the thing that I know to be right or feel to be right? Never stretch or snap zone. So we don't need to be doing things that are outside of our zone of competence. We just want to stretch ourselves a little bit, take action in the presence of fear.
I like that
and then
too.
Love.
I like that definition simply because it tells you not to wait around until there is not fear. because it will always be there.
And if it's not, it's a sign that we're not exercising that expansive discipline. It's that we're not trying to grow ourselves. If you have no fear, turn up the intensity a little bit. Find that thing that is at your edge of growth. By definition, growth is going to be uncomfortable. So you want to find that edge, find that little bit of like, and then willingness to do it anyway, demonstrating that virtue of courage. The virtue also on this horizontal axis in the way that we've mapped out with this compass is love. So the 4 virtues that ancient wisdom universally agrees upon: wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love. We would say love is being present, is being connected, is being genuine, generous, encouraging. Can you be loving? Ancient wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love. All the traditions agree upon those. Positive psychology, when they started to found this science of flourishing, they looked back and saw that coherence. They said, wow, everyone's saying the same thing. When you live with self-mastery, when you live with wisdom, with self-mastery, with courage and love, you live a higher quality of life. And then they found 5 virtues that are most highly correlated with well-being according to the science. So in addition to wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love, which we put on the north, south, and east-west axis, we've kind of filled in the sub-cardinal virtues with these 5 virtues from positive psychology. The number 1 virtue most highly correlated with well-being is zest. Zest is a fancy word for energy, it's vitality, it's life force. We say that living with zest is I dominate my fundamentals so that I can have heroic energy. Saving the deeper conversation, the fundamentals are eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, these physiological foundation that provides your body with the energy that it needs to show up well to your work, to your love. I know we'll get to that in a future episode, but zest is the number 1 virtue, according to positive psychology, most highly correlated with well-being. Then second place is a tie between hope and gratitude. So hope, the definition the scientists give us is I have a clear goal, agency, and pathways. There are 3 facets of hope: that clear goal, a future that is better than the present. You've got a clear goal, a clear target, that telos we talked about before. You have agency, a sense of confidence in your ability to hit that target. If you're setting a target, I'm going to beat Roger Federer in tennis. I don't have any agency. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to have a lot of hope because I just don't believe in my ability to do that. So you want to have a sense of agency, a sense of confidence, and then pathways, which is multiple plans to accomplish that goal. If you're reliant on one plan going well, one plan succeeding, not going to have a lot of hope. If you know, and this is balanced portfolio theory, right? If I need to have one investment and this investment needs to go well, otherwise I'm insert choice word, not going well. But if I can have multiple pathways, right? I've got some money here, I got some money in these companies, I'm investing in debt, and I've got some gold and all the balanced portfolio theory. It's like financial pathways for hope. So we want to have a clear goal, a sense of agency, and then pathways. That's the science of hope.
Hope is a wonderful planning framework. In fact, our masterclass in the club is all about have a vision for your future, organize in your resources so you have agency, identify the places that you can make changes, and then find the multiple pathways to choose. It's a wonderful planning framework in a lot of things, actually.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
we want to ground that hope in reality. So love the book, Rethinking Positive Thinking, Gabrielle Ottingen. She offers a framework called WOOP, which stands for Wish Outcome Obstacle Plan. And part of that pathways in hope and why we want to ground it in reality is like, look, we can all have amazing, beautiful wishes and dreams and ideals. And life is challenging. Life is tough. We are going to be thrown obstacles. Things are going to happen and we need to know how to navigate, which is why having just one pathway is unwise. It's fragile. Yeah. Having multiple pathways and knowing if this happens, then I'm going to do this, grounds that hope in a sense of reality, in a sense of confidence.
Yeah. In our world, we want to have a vision and then we want to have a feasible plan, which assumes that you've renegotiated with yourself to balance what is actually feasible. And then you want to make that feasible plan resilient, create multiple pathways so you don't get knocked off course easy. You can still achieve it even if you get smacked around, which you will. Yeah.
But only always. Which brings us to the next virtue that's tied for second place. The scientists arm wrestle on this one, gratitude. So zest is number 1, most highly correlated. Hope and gratitude are 2 and 3, depending on who you talk to. Gratitude is an appreciation for life and appreciation for all its blessings. And that includes when we're getting knocked down. That includes when things aren't going well. In fact, it might even be most important when things are not going well and it's not about optimism or putting on rose-colored glass when things are challenging. It's about learning to be grateful for the things. We all have things that we can be grateful for. Even if it's just, I woke up this morning. I'm still breathing. I've got this relationship. I've got this, if you're going to go next level, I'm grateful for the opportunity to grow stronger because of this challenge.
That's a hard one.
It's next level. But when we really get that and we can, in the midst of the challenge, feel that gratitude for, I'm going to be stronger from this. Therefore, let me not enter it begrudgingly, but with joy and to strive to do my best. And if you think about someone who's physically working out, like imagine someone under a squat rack. I think Nassim Taleb talks about this as an example. But if you take someone who's under a squat rack or who's pushing a lot of weight on the bench press or any kind of weightlifting activity or running, whatever it is, and you take the physical sensations that are going on in their body and like drop those physical sensations on someone who's sitting on the couch, the person on the couch will be like, this is nuts. This is crazy. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But the person who's trying to get stronger, they feel that sensation. They say, yeah, this is me getting stronger.
That's a good frame of it. Yeah. Yeah. That's
to grow stronger. So to have that gratitude and then to round it out, curiosity, which we started it out with. I'm open to life and new perspectives. I see what's working and what needs work. Having that sense of curiosity for life. We talked about the young kid with that curiosity for what do I enjoy doing? What do I not enjoy doing? The fifth virtue is love. So love actually counts twice. It is one of the ancient virtues that everyone agrees upon is important. It is one of the modern virtues that positive psychology says is most highly correlated with well-being. So we've got wisdom, self-mastery, courage, love, hope, gratitude, curiosity, and zest. I want to frame this quickly. And also, those are the universal virtues. So again, ancient wisdom, all wisdom traditions say like those are important on the cardinal side of things. On the sub-cardinal, positive psychology shows those are the virtues most highly correlated with well-being. Every single person will want to work on cultivating those in their life. Some of us have some that are natural strengths, others we might want to work on, but it's important to strive to cultivate those in addition to our individual unique virtues. So there's a test that you can take, the virtues and actions test, that will tell you what are the virtues that you personally as an individual demonstrate most easily, that just come most naturally to you. The VIA, Strengths Finder assessment, the virtues assessment, and it'll give you your top 5 along with the top 24. And it doesn't mean if you've got a virtue that's like number 23, 24, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily low in that virtue. It just is the lowest among your top ones or the least natural to you. But taking that test and figuring out, okay, I know these universal virtues that everyone says are important, ancient wisdom, modern science. And I also know my individual unique virtues to me, and I'm going to look for opportunities to put those virtues into action, to live those virtues moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And in the app, we've got a compass. It's got these virtues, that's got those declarations. But whether you have the app or not, to think about this in terms of as you're going throughout your day, and I don't remember how you framed the sprint challenge or the agile challenge.
We do smart sprints in this show. We do smart sprints.
Smart sprints. So to pause, what virtue could I embody more in this moment? What virtue would help me navigate this moment a little bit more in alignment with the best version of myself? Could I use more wisdom? Could I use more self-mastery? Could I use more courage? Could I use more love? Could I use more hope? Could I use more gratitude? Could I use more curiosity? Could I use more zest? When I'm in that big conversation, I could probably use most of those. Let me be grateful for my partner that I'm in this relationship. Let me have the wisdom to know I can't change their mind, and that's not even the game at all. Let me have the curiosity to be open to what they're saying. Let me have the courage to speak up for what I think is true and speak my true self into this. Let me have the love to recognize that we're on a team. So we can take all of the virtues and map them onto all sorts of different experiences. But if we look for opportunities to put those virtues into practice, to put those virtues into action, then we'll be expressing the best version of ourselves moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And ultimately, feel this deep sense of joy and satisfaction by doing it again and doing it again and doing it again. Live with a little bit more virtue, live a little bit more virtue, live a little bit more virtue. Again, never perfectly, never getting to that distant shore because it is not there, but following that guiding star of expressing the best version of myself by putting these virtues into action more and more consistently. So
that's going to be the smart sprint for this week, is to pause. Maybe you're going to the grocery store. maybe you're going to talk to your child or a coworker going into the meeting. Pause, think of one of these virtues or one that you found for yourself and say, how do I exhibit this right now? Maybe it's curiosity. I think of Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. I'm going to go in this and just be curious. So that's your action item for the next 7 days. So what we've done so far, those last 2 weeks, is we defined what a hero is, and then we all are heroes. We all can be heroes. And then we've given some framework of how to lean in, go +1 into being more heroic right now. We've given a framework of things to think about. Next week, I'm excited about this one. We're going to talk about establishing some identities in 3 domains. So we're going to keep going a little bit deeper so we can have a framework for how do you live a heroic retirement, rock retirement, choose your amazing framework. So thanks, Michael. Looking forward to next week.
I want to add or put the cherry on top of that. Brian has a brilliant line that I love. Brian Johnson, our founder, CEO, my biggest mentor, teacher, dear friend, founder, CEO of Heroic, changed my life with the wisdom that he shared. And everything that I'm sharing is a reflection of the work that he has distilled and shared with me. But the moment that you live with arte, the moment that you live with virtue, the moment that you express the best version of yourself with these virtues, you are heroic. So that is a heroic act to strive to be the best version of yourself. So that is a game that we can all win, as you said, right now. But making that connection between the moment that you do this, you are living heroically. And can we do that more and more consistently through our days, through our lives?
All right, let's get to some of your questions on how do you rock retirement. Now, if you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger, and you can type in a question. We're going to read some written questions here, or you can leave an audio question straight from your computer or smartphone. Now, just a hint, we have a fast pass when it comes to questions. We try to prioritize audio questions. Why? Because I just love to hear your voice asking your question in your own words. So you can check that out at rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger. So our first question comes from Bill in regards to dividends and other things when it comes to the bucket approach or the pie cake that we call it here on the show. Bill says, hey, good morning. Love the show. Been listening for a while now. Just signed up for 6 Shots Saturday. Awesome, Bill. Hopefully you're enjoying it. On the subject of this first bucket of secure income for the first 5 years, do you consider dividends from investment grade corporates acceptable as meeting the requirements as appropriate for the near-term liquidity need? I'm set to retire and live off dividends and deferred income for the first 5 years at this point. The 2 liquidity needs, just not sure how you would consider that secure or not. That's a great question, Bill. And the short answer, yeah, I would. And the way that you would determine this from a structure standpoint is when you have dividends from individual stocks or interest from bonds or dividends or interest from mutual funds or other sources, generally in the accumulation phase of life, we have reinvested those cash flows to buy more shares of the stock or of the mutual fund. Can't really do that with a bond, obviously, an individual bond anyway. Generally, we have reinvested those, meaning that when they issue a dividend, we would buy more shares of whatever the investment was. That's the normal practice, keep reinvesting, and that's sort of the snowball effect. Well, when you reach retirement, cash flow becomes much more important. Typically, and you're in a great situation here, Bill, typically the cash flows from investments aren't enough to cover spending just because of interest rates and the amount of money you'd have to have, etc. So the way you would go about figuring this out is I would build your 5-year cash flow model of showing all of your income sources, social capital, Social Security, pension, human capital if you're going to work. And then you have the option, and I think this is your case, Bill, of, hey, I'm not going to reinvest dividends or capital gains and or interest. I'm actually going to use that to live off of. And if you decide to do that, you would put that into that cash flow model as receiving the money. And then below the income sources, you would put your spending via base great life, wants, and wishes. And then that would show you whether you would have a deficit or not. You could do your tax estimates for 5 years, etc. So yeah, Bill, I think that's perfectly acceptable. And that's a lever that you have. You could also choose to simply reinvest those things. And in that case, you wouldn't put them on the income model or the income forecast. So yeah, I think that's a great strategy, Bill, if you have the principle to be able to do that. Why not? I think that's a good idea. So our next question comes from Dan about cash value life insurance. So Dan says, hey, Roger, I love the show and do not recall if you've ever covered a 7702 cash value plan. A friend is being courted by an insurance broker, and my advice is that insurance is an insurance and not an investment. For background, he is a high net worth individual that has excess cash and is looking for alternative investments. Thanks for your expert opinion. Oh, you bet, Dan. I'll give you at least some perspective on it. Now, I am not an insurance expert. That is not my pedigree as an advisor. So I didn't come from the insurance world. I tend to have a little bit of a bias of what you're saying, Dan. Insurance is an insurance, investments are investments, and conflating the two, you can create Twinkies, things that are a little bit more complicated than they need to be. So I have a little bit of bias there and also a little bit of limits on my depth of knowledge here. So with that disclaimer, the good news about a 7702 life insurance contract is that it's a version of permanent insurance that has tax advantaged. That's tax advantaged, meaning that money that goes in there can grow depending on how it's invested or the guaranteed accounts. And because it gets that status, it's viewed by the government as allowable insurance. And it's also possible to obtain a non-7702 life insurance contract with proceeds where the proceeds are taxed as ordinary income. These would be more considered an investment vehicle. And when he's looking at one of these plans, I think it's really important to understand that these type of policies have to pass certain tests to qualify as insurance. In other words, such a policy is by definition insurance and not an investment. And they also have front-loaded fees. Around 20% of these policies end up lapsing within the first 3 years, according to the research I've done. So it's a cash value life insurance. You can put a lot of money into it, but there are tests to make sure it stays quote unquote insurance so it maintains that tax advantage status. And then there's these guaranteed loans you can do. Here's my on-the-ground experience dealing with these after they've been put in place. So that's most of my experience with these types of things is not putting them into place, but having a client that has a policy that they've had for some time. And now they're later on and they're trying to figure out, one, how to access it. Two, is it going to implode or not? My experience has been that these are extremely easy to get into and a little bit more problematic to get out of. And so I've not had a great experience. I've dealt with policies where the forecasted interest rate versus premiums, because essentially inside these things, what they're doing is they're buying term life insurance every single year. So the cost of insurance within the contract to support the death benefit goes up a little bit every year. And as you get older, it goes up a lot quicker. And if the insurance and what it's earning has to be able to keep up with that. If it doesn't, you have to keep feeding the contract in terms of sending in premiums to make sure the contract continue. Because if it can't continue, then it will quote unquote implode, meaning that it will dissolve and become a taxable event based on your cash value versus the premiums you put in, et cetera. And the fact that they do have the ability to do tax-free loans against the cash value is attractive in the short term, but it can be problematic in the long term because when you do a cash value loan where you borrow money against your cash value, basically tax-free, you just get a loan from yourself. Well, that puts the loan in there into the policy, which lowers the cash value, which could exacerbate an issue later on in life when you want to get out of them. So I'm just not a fan of them. I mean, there may be certain instances where they can be an optimization strategy, but I would be very careful and I would exhaust every other thing that you could do before you go to this level of quote unquote optimization. The more complicated you make things, and this is definitely one of those kind of products, you're not just doing it with the decision to do it. It's one of those things you're going to have to live with for decades and manage and incorporate. And that's where it can get really sticky. So I'm a little bit in your boat, Dan. I would tell them to be careful. Our next question or comment actually comes from Steve. Steve says, hey, Roger, love your podcast. Well, thank you, Steve. I love that you listen. Just listening to your response to Jennifer about can I retire on average returns? Your advice reminded me of a critical tenet that lives in college campus planning. I am an architect. First, you don't call them master plans as they are never the answer. We typically call them framework plans. So the tenet, we strive for a flexible framework that can be strategically reactive. Donors, shift in curriculum delivery, regulatory requirements, always variables, just to name a few in the academic world. I love that strategically reactive paradox. True, isn't it? In any case, just sharing, feel free to lift it if it resonates. Keep up the good work of informing the masses. Well, thanks, Steve. This idea, I think one thing that is underappreciated and undervalued is optionality and this idea of being agile. It's in the financial planning world and retirement planning world, because one, it's something that most retirement planners and financial planners aren't familiar with, this whole agile structure. Two, it doesn't fit into the model of most investment houses and the financial planning process. And most advisors are looking to scale, and it doesn't scale necessarily well. And I think it's really undervalued too, because we want to have certainty. As the consumer, say you, most people want to have some certainty. They crave those things. And it's easy from the advisor or planner side to try to simply provide those things, even if it's not true. Not that they're being nefarious in any way, because the advisor they want to be able to say, yeah, you're going to be okay. Or yes, this is the answer, because they want to help people. So there's this uncomfortableness that everybody's trying to avoid. And I think it's not healthy to do that. It sets up for bad conversations and potentially bad outcomes. Whereas if you accept uncertainty and the fact that it's always there, then you can spend less time trying to get certainty and spend more time of how do I manage all these variables over time? And that's essentially what an agile project or agile retirement management does. So thanks for the perspective, Steve. And I think this resonates a lot too, whether it's in the collegiate world. I know I have a lot of people in technology that email me that use agile in some form or another. It's about managing processes and decision-making. And the last little thing I'll say there is we really undervalue having options, the optionality part, and maintaining that. And I'll go back to the last question about life insurance. When you're in a life insurance policy like that, it's a fairly concrete pathways that has big barriers in taxes and fees to get out of. So you lose a lot of optionality when you buy one of those. And optionality is one way that we remain resilient. We can remain anti-fragile, and it's easy to box ourselves in to where we have a lot fewer decisions. And that's not a healthy place to be in my experience. Our next question is a Social Security question. Ooh, exciting. From Steve.
Hello, Roger. This is Steve in California. I discovered your podcast about 2 years ago, and it revolutionized many of the ways I've approached retirement. I'm a 64-year-old widower and have been retired for about a year. When I retired, I began collecting Social Security survivor benefits on my wife's account. I also work part-time with my old employer. My dilemma is this. I'm approaching the earnings limit imposed by Social Security upon those less than full retirement age. I'd like to keep working part-time, but I'm spooked by the penalty that Social Security will impose. As you know, they'll withhold $1 in benefits for every $2 I earn. Would you please share your words of wisdom on this subject? Thanks so much.
Well, I'm glad that you are getting value from the show, Steve. Seriously, I just love to hear that. Okay, so what Steve's talking about is collecting Social Security benefits prior to full retirement age. So he started collecting his survivor benefits at age 63, and he's a few more years away from full retirement age, and he's starting to hit this income limit. So what he's talking about there is if you take Social Security prior to full retirement age, the Social Security Administration will reduce your benefit, actual money that you receive, $1 for every $2 you earn above a certain threshold. So I think for 2022, for an individual, it's $19,560, which means in Steve's case, if he goes over that limit, he'll get more money from his paycheck for working, but he'll start to get a smaller Social Security check because of this income limitation. This is something that only happens if you're taking Social Security prior to full retirement age. And then so here's the deal, Steve. Yes, that can happen. Now, when you reach full retirement age, your earnings will no longer be reduced even if you continue earning money. In addition, what the Social Security Administration will do is they will recalculate your benefit amount and give you credit for the months that you had a reduced benefit because of these excess earnings. So you do actually get the money back over time. I think it's over like a 15-year period, I believe, that they recalculate it. So when you reach full retirement age, your check will actually go up because they're going to say, this is how much we took or we held back from Steve because he was over the threshold. Now we're going to recalculate the benefit so he gets that money back over, I forget what time frame they used. So there are very few scenarios mathematically, Steve, where the Social Security limit does long-term harm. Instead, it's more frustrating in the short term. So I wouldn't get too worried about it, but something definitely to be aware of. So next question comes from Catherine in regards to financial abuse. So Catherine says, my husband and I are setting up a living trust, and there's a problem that I'm not sure how to solve. I grew up in a very affluent California golfing area where a lot of parents had owned homes for a long time and could easily have millions of dollars in equity. As these people aged, I can list a dozen or more cases where family, friends, and just random people got control of these estates, and the bad actors were able to spend all of the money out of them by being named by the older person as their caregiver and their executors. The money was spent under the guise of quote-unquote care for the elderly person. In at least 5 of these cases, they moved the person into their home, did extreme remodels to make the home more accessible. These were dumb and gullible people, but they were getting up there in age. What can you do to protect your legacy to make sure it goes to who you want? Was this just something weird in this geographical area? Well, that last question first, Catherine, no, it's not. It's not confined to any particular geographical area. Bad people go where the money is, and that can be anywhere. But where there's more concentration, and it's obvious that from your experience, you've seen a lot. So what can you do, you and your husband, to protect your finances while you age? This could be a very deep topic and maybe an entire show by itself, but let's get a couple ideas to at least get you started there, Catherine. I think when you're setting up a living trust, which when one or both of you pass will convert to a irrevocable trust. I think trust planning is one way to do that. One thing you do is you can start to vet caring candidates now while you're younger and less likely to be targets of con artists, whether it be family or not. And then try not to change them. So start to build relationships with what you can find as good actors to be there for either you or your husband if one of you were to pass away, and to help guide that person. And the longer you can have some relational currency with someone, the better. Another thing you could do is, from a trust planning standpoint, consider having a third party or a professional overseer of your finances. And there could be triggers that you could put in place. That's outside of my expertise. So if and when one of you is not capable to track the finances or capable to withstand the pressures of children and cousins or neighbors, etc., there is a third party that is overseen to do that. So I'll use an example of one that I have dealt with for, probably my oldest client, decades now. And I think I mentioned it on the floor. So when there was a couple and they had a trust in place, so when the financial manager member of the couple passed away, all of the assets went into a trust for the benefit of the surviving spouse, who is now in their 80s. And there is a corporate trustee, so you have a trust, you have a trustee that is in charge of executing the trust document and making sure the rules are followed within that. And we chose a corporate trustee, literally a trust company. There are trust companies, and many banks have them and larger brokerage houses have them. And the trust company, all they do is manage trusts, and they have trust officers that they appoint to be the go-between. And their job is to make sure the trusted terms are followed. And the nice thing about a corporate trustee, although it costs money, is that they have a lot of oversight. It's a corporate, not an individual, because a lot of times we'll name individuals as trustees, which can be very convenient. The difficulty is that individuals change. They have different degrees of interest and attention to detail and competencies and their life circumstances, whereas a corporate trustee will always be there. And if you have the proper guardians in place, it can be a great thing. So the way this operates with this corporate trustee in my situation is I am the advisor that works with the client, and I am the intermediary between the corporate trustee and the client. So when the client needs money, we have to submit to the corporate trustee to receive money, say, for the new car. And they review that and they approve it, and then they distribute the money. And then every year we have to do a budget of what is it that we need to have drawn out of this trust for the health, maintenance, and support of this particular client. So we submit the budget to the trustee. They oversee it. They oversee the investments that we're doing on our end. And that is a way that you might be able to protect against nefarious actors, whether they be family or not. And another third option is as you get older, even if you don't do it initially, as you start to get older, you can look at annuitizing or creating guaranteed income flows via annuitization of things, and et cetera, which means the assets are gone, but guaranteed payments are there. And that might make someone a lot less attractive. So there are some things to think about as you walk this journey. So the last one we're going to get today is some feedback and some thoughts from RK on a question that I answered earlier regarding someone using a financial planner. I think it was Connie. It was episode 434, I think is where I answered the original question. So RK says, "Hey, Roger, longtime listener and love the show. It's by far the best of its kind out there." Well, thank you. And RK says, "For some reason, I've been thinking a lot about your answer to a question last month, and I believe the listener's name was Connie, and she asked what questions should she ask her advisor at their regular meeting. Your response was thoughtful and very good and directed at her specific question. But I thought it was from an advisor perspective, which of course makes sense given your background. It sure does. But RK had some thoughts for Connie, and maybe we can all take these. My thoughts are twofold. Number one, does she know the basics of their relationship? A related question not specifically asked, but one that I am guessing many clients can't answer, like, are you a fiduciary or a broker? That's a good one, RK. Or do they even know what the difference is? How does the advisor get paid? Fee or commission? What fee schedule am I on? How does that compare with similar accounts? What do you have as my risk profile? What benchmarks should we use for that risk profile? And number two, she says, or RK says, periodic questions that deserve checking in on, maybe not every meeting, but frequently. What fees am I paying you? Does that include any fund fees? How does my performance compare to benchmarks? I think all of those questions are around the actual active investment management. And I think they're great questions to ask. I would also add one in there is, what services are you providing me? Is it just investment management, or what other things can I go to you for in thinking through? Are you going to help me if I'm going to navigate a mortgage or look at past things? What services are you actually providing me? I think would be a good one. RK continues, maybe this falls outside the scope of this specific question, but a periodic meeting might also be a good time to cover the basics of a client-advisor relationship if the client doesn't already know. Also, a good time to mention FINRA's broker check to your audience too. Keep up the great work. So what RK is referring to, if you go to finra.org, there is a broker check. And if you click broker check, you can type in someone's name, type in Roger Whitney, and it will show you all the Roger Whitneys, and you can identify the one that you're looking for, or you have other ways of looking for people. And it will show the advisor's entire work history from the moment they were licensed as an advisor, all the different firms that they've worked for. It'll also show if there are any reportable events, meaning have they had a dispute with a client over a certain threshold? Have they declared bankruptcy? Have they been convicted of certain crimes, or are they in the middle of a lawsuit? So that's a great suggestion of just a quick check of, is this person have any issues? So something maybe you want to check every year. Thank you so much, RK. Great ideas for Connie and for all of us. With that, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, I want you to be aware of that moment between a stimulus and what your response to that stimulus is. As Michael and I talked about, that moment between stimulus and response is our chance to exert control, to choose. It could be a guy tailgates you. That's the stimulus. How do you respond? I know how I respond sometimes when I'm not mastering that moment in between, but you have a choice. Perhaps it's walking by Cinnabon and that stimulus is the smell. You can master the response. So just be aware of that moment to exercise your virtue. I always laugh at myself because when I get to this part of the show, I don't know how to end it. I want you to have a great day. Today is the day to exercise those virtues. And I just hope you have a great week, and we'll chat again either on Saturday via 6 Shot Saturday or next week on the show. Be well. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.